Hi guys, welcome back. This is a short video to show how I made this display base for the Knight of Gold using foam and wood. I had it displayed in standing mode, so I need to switch it to firing mode. Here's how it's done. It's not the easiest swap, but it's not too bad. The first thing I'm going to do is stain the bases. I like to use artist's acrylics since it's not smelly like the usual oil-based stains. The round base is for the standing pose, and I've already sanded both of the bases smooth. So it's just a matter of applying the paint and wiping it off before it's able to dry. Acrylic does dry quickly, so you have to be a little quick with it. The result will leave the wood stained but not painted. For the larger base, I'm using black. It'll be more of a painted look in the end, but at this point I was still trying to stain it. I should mention that I don't really have a mapped out plan. I have an overall idea of what I'm doing with this project, but things can change during the build. This is pink insulating foam from Home Depot, or you can probably find it at most hardware stores that sell insulation. I've cut it to the size I want with a sharp knife, and now I'm going to mark the spot where the motor head will stand. Starting with my hobby knife, I'm trimming all around to create some forms. I switched to a bigger knife to remove more material. I had a larger razor, but I couldn't find it, but this is sharp enough. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't really have a plan other than where it's standing, so I'm allowing the shapes to come out naturally based on some reference images. Since the rear foot doesn't sit flat, I want to put some rocks under it so it looks like it's bracing against it. I'll use some of the spare foam from the trimming earlier. Running a flame quickly over the surface will melt down the rough spots, but make sure you do it in a ventilated area. It's pretty toxic. This is a support because the 2-foot long cannon throws off the balance. The shorter one is the proper length from the surface, but I needed to go into the wood for a permanent mount. So I'm going to drill a hole that's the proper size. I'm just eyeballing to find the size I need. Now that the longer one is mounted, I need to trim it to the proper size, which I'm about to mark here with my knife. Because the acrylic rod is relatively thin and doesn't flex much, it's easy to just break it off at the proper point instead of cutting it. The top isn't going to be visible, so it doesn't have to look perfect. Using pliers, I grip it firmly just below the mark I made and simply break off the top. Here I'm adding some texture with a random item. In this case, it's a pen. The sides were a little rough from where I melted them earlier, so I'm doing a little trimming to smooth it out. More fine-tuning until it looks right. Just trust your instincts to know when to stop. Now to add the base texture with Tamiya's Diorama Soil Effect. This is a water-based product, basically just some kind of gritty texture mixed with paint. This is what it looks like after it's dried and the surface is pretty firm. I haven't used this product very much, so I'm experimenting here with different application techniques, starting with this plastic knife, adding some smaller shapes with the paint mixing tool. Eventually I started using a stiff brush to add some additional texture and help smooth everything out. It covers the surface pretty well, but it's a little time consuming. And some final stippling with the brush to bring everything together. I want to imprint the feet into the soil, but I don't want to get paint on the feet, so I'm using kitchen cling wrap as a barrier. I live in an apartment and don't have a backyard, but there are parks around where I've gathered some dirt and rocks to make dioramas. Here I'm adding some larger rocks, as well as sprinkling some dirt to vary the texture. This is tacky PVA glue diluted with water to hold down the rocks and dirt. I'm using the brush and paper towel to soak up the excess glue. Some of the larger rocks wouldn't stick to the diluted glue, so I'm gluing them on with full strength. Solvent-based paints might melt the foam, so I'm painting with Vallejo Model Air water-based acrylic, various shades of brown, starting with burnt umber. This is going to give everything an even color, and I'll be working my way up to the lighter colors. Since I see people in modeling groups asking about cleaning airbrushes all the time, I figured I'd show how I clean between colors with Vallejo. Keep in mind this is just how I do it. There isn't really a definitive way as long as your airbrush is clean in the end. After the session, I'll remove the needle and do a deeper cleaning. Now I'm switching to a lighter color, but I'm spraying at an angle, so that some of the base color shows through in the shadows. Time to glue the foam to the base. I found that wood glue works better than the regular white PVA glue for the foam. My bottle is kinda old, so I have to squeeze it really hard to get it to come out. This is basswood. The foam edges were rougher than I expected, so I decided to cover it in wood veneer. It's fairly soft, so you can cut it and carve it easily. To trim up the sides so that they're even. I decided to use scissors, but I should test it first to make sure it's gonna work. Yep. Using a pencil, mark the areas that will need trimming, following the contours of the groundwork. As you can see, the wood is carved pretty easily with a hobby knife. Eventually the pieces fell apart, but that's okay, I'll fix them later. After everything's carved, I glue it to the base, but the side started to warp, so I taped it down to keep it straight. Now that the sides are glued, I'm going to fill the gaps around the edges with the soil effect. Next day and I'm ready to paint, but first to smooth out some rough areas. I'm starting with the sides because they'll be easier to mask if I do them first. Also at this point, I realized that the base is going to be solid black instead of the stained look that I was originally going for, but it works well, so it's not a big deal. Now I need to repaint the groundwork the same way that I did it before. I'm redoing the whole thing because otherwise they might have a different tonal color if I were to just blend the edges. Forgot to tape this. This time I'm building the lighter color up more slowly so that there will be a little variation in some areas. And the lightest color for a few highlights. I have some paint left in my cup, so I'm pouring it back into the bottle. Using a brush and Vallejo's thicker model color line, I'm adding some different colors to some rocks for a little subtle variety. And some dry brushing to bring out some highlights, still keeping it subtle. And the last step is to touch up the sides. And there you have it. While a plain base still looks nice, the terrain base gives the model a nice setting that ties back to the original source material. If you've read the manga or seen the anime, then you'll know what I'm talking about. As always, thanks for watching.